To celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Final Fantasy XIV, we have gotten a set of new short stories. These are being released post-patch 6.4, so keep that in mind. There may be spoilers for any content before that. This is the 4th story, A Legacy of Hope. Rearranging every single chamber in the Grand Louvier estate was a monumental task, yet Amelians welcomed the challenge all the same. Having volunteered to host an exchange student from Thavnir, she has seized the opportunity to repurpose the dusty old meeting room. Gone were the Confederate tables and stiff-backed chairs, replaced by a plush feather bed and a carefully curated handful of cheerful knickknacks. With each new furnishing the attendants delivered, the space had grown cozier until the air of cold bureaucracy was quietly dispelled. Once everything was in place, Amelians paused to survey her work, a satisfied smile beginning to form on her lips, until a jutting desk drawer caught her eye. A single discordant note spoiling the harmony. "Well, that won't do." She gave the offending item a hearty shove, but the drawer remained stubbornly open. That's the trouble with these old antiques, always in need of attention. Indeed, with its faded wood and old-fashioned decoration, the desk more than qualified. This must have been in the family for 2, nay, 3 generations. Her husband's father had likely purchased it when he was a young man, after which it would have been passed down to Fortuno when he came of age, before he in turn entrusted it to Alphino. A little wonder it won't budge an ilm. Subsequent attempts to close the drawer proved fruitless. With a sigh, she pulled it open instead, and the source of her trouble became clear. Towards the back, the cover of what appeared to be a concealed compartment had worked itself loose, obstructing the drawer's closure. Louisoix had been rather rebellious in his prime, and had doubtlessly acquired the desk to serve as a home for his secrets. As Amelians had raised 2 rebels of her own, she had stumbled upon more than a few contraband-filled nooks and crannies in her time. Naturally, he could not help but take a look, and inside found a leather-bound notebook. An old journal, perhaps? A moment later it was open in her hands, and a grin crept across her face as he recognized the confident curves of Alphino's letters on the faded parchment. It was 1572, a year that would go down in history as the last of the 6th astral era. The first sun of the 3rd astral moon had risen, and spring winds from the south had finally reached old Charlene's shore. A crisp, refreshing morning like this held boundless possibilities, yet Alphino Levieur was insufferably bored. Though he had been accepted into the studium at the remarkably early age of 11 no less, it would be some time before he walked through his hallowed gate as a student. His day's schooling already concluded, he drifted about the manor aimless and anxious. He had hoped to pass a few hours with his grandfather, but Alice had set off with the Archon at dawn to browse the markets, and while his sister had taken their dog Angelo with her, she had conveniently forgotten to invite her own brother. Ugh. Still, he did not blame Alice for wanting to spend as much time with her grandfather as he could. Louisoix would soon depart for a benighted realm of Eorzea across the sea, for it was not in his nature to ignore the plight of those in need. Alphino eventually resigned himself to an afternoon of reading in the garden and made for the estate great hall. The chamber stood dark and empty when he entered, save for a figure standing tall in the doorway. "Have you business to attend to, father?" "An inspection." Orsino addressed his own flesh and blood with self-same terseness he would a junior colleague. Not that Alphino was deterred, it had ever been those. "How very industrious, but was this not to be a day of rest?" "I do this of my own accord, not of the foreign behest." "In that case, may I join you?" The young prodigy attempted to hide his excitement, but his white eyes betrayed him. Fortuno regarded him thoughtfully. After what felt like an age, he answered with a nod. So it was that the boy escaped the stifling walls of the estate and followed his father on to destinations unknown. Alphino breathed deep of the crisp air as he basked in the pale sunlight. Their path afforded them a view of the Agora and, unexpectedly, of Malisity. Curious yet cautious, he took care not to be spotted as they passed, his gaze flitting back and forth between the path ahead and the distant plaza. Malisity was unattended, kneeling as he played with Angelo. Nearby, Louisbois was surrounded by a small crowd of academics. Scholar Montaigne stood tall in their midst, flanked by a rather more diminutive Professor Urusha and Nenilimo Totolimo. An impassioned discussion, no doubt. Alphino suspected it would go on for quite a while. As the bustle of the city grew distant and the path steeper, Alphino realized they were bound for the rostra. The proud hill had once been an open forum where all were welcome to take part in the grand debates. Now, however, only the 99 members of the forum, his father included, were granted that privilege, and they conducted the deliberation behind closed doors. What manner of personal matter would necessitate visiting here of all places? Stay close. They entered through a small doorway on the building left, where a dimly lit stairwell awaited them, extending deeper and deeper until it finally gave way to a sizable chamber. Alphino's eyes were drawn to a set of 2 metal gates under heavy surveillance. From somewhere below he could hear the quiet chatter of scholars, though he was more acutely aware of the sentry's questioning gaze. There were few in Charlene who did not know his father, however, and they visibly relaxed as Fortuno identified himself. After fielding the relevant procedural inquiries and paperwork, the levier stepped through the gate and entered a circular room. Moments later, the floor shuddered and sunk beneath them, a metallic hum accompanying its descent. They had, Alphino belatedly realized, boarded a lift. As his mind raced with possibilities, the cold marble walls of the forum suddenly vanished, and a beautiful horizon stretched out beneath him. Father, what is all this? You must surely have heard the rumors surrounding Labyrinthos. Charlene had been built over a dormant volcano, and some whispered of an artificial ecosystem hidden in the hollow caldera, a vault to house flora and fauna from every corner of the star. But never in my wildest dreams. Alphino gaped in awe at the artificial sky, brilliant blue in light of a man-made sun. The lift screeched to a halt as they reached the ground, and he caught his father smirking as they strolled into the stone courtyard. A marvel, is it not? The wind generator were but recently completed. After initial testing, I was not convinced they would function as required, but it appears my concerns were unwarranted. Artificial though it was, the breeze was no less pleasant than the one they had enjoyed on the surface. Strands of Alphino's hair danced in the wind, while the false sun warmed his shoulders. He approached the parapet, admiring the rising and falling of the verdant hills. It's as if we left Charlene entirely, he uttered in quiet wonder. His father was but a few steps behind, ready with an answer. We sought to recreate the milder climates of Corvus in southern Ilspart. The Garleans call that region Locus Amoenus, their utopia. Seeing this, one can understand why. It was rare for his father to speak at such length, or with such passion. The scenery was idyllic, but Alphino suspected this utopia had not been created without substantial difficulty. Later, Fortuno took him to Logistico Alpha, where Alphino listened intently to lectures on the weather system. It was a veritable feast of knowledge. Being surrounded by the latest in Charlene technology made his heart soar, and he wished for nothing more than to learn all he could about the inner workings of Labyrinthos. They had joined a tour to see more, and once it had ended, Alphino motioned toward the wooden road to the north. Might we venture further in? His father shook his head. Our business here is concluded. It is time I took you home. Alphino's heart sank like a stone, as he felt the magic of this wonderful world begin to fade. But he knew from his father's tone that the matter was settled. I must be reasonable, mature. The boy took a breath and nodded, his calm countenance befitting that of a livier. And then he felt a spark of childish hope flicker once more. But Porcino, dearest, it's the perfect weather for a picnic. As if by divine providence, Alfino's mother had materialized behind them, bearing a heavily woven basket and the promise of delicious respite. Alice and Louisois waited not far beyond, laughing as Angelo frolicked in the midst. You've all been having such lovely adventures without me. I think we'd overdo a proper family outing, don't you? Emilien's voice was gentle as sunshine, but neither Alfino nor his father were so naive as to presume this was a suggestion. Not even the Forum United could deny her. Thus did the levier proceed to picnic on the grassy hill of the medial circuit. On the base of Pneuma they unfurled their blanket, and from Emilien's basket withdrew sumptuous sweets from the last stand, all packed neatly in rows, that would be paired with equally fragrant teas. Naturally, the gathering garnered attention, and those who recognized the family could not resist stopping for chat. The wise old Gal of Baldesion spotted them first. He excused himself after brief pleasantries and returned with his adoptive granddaughter, whom he was eager to introduce to Alfino and Alice, knowing that Kyle would be their senior at the studio. Emiliens was delighted to share a cup of tea with the young Lalafell. Kyle accepted with a smile and assured the levier matriarch that he would keep a close eye on the twins. Not long after the Baldesion had taken their first sip of tea, Alfino espied his grandfather's stalwart disciples. Moonbrita Wilfsonvi announced her arrival with a full-throated greeting, before dragging Urianger Augurelt into the direction of the picnic blanket. Urianger for his part expressed reluctance to intrude upon the levier's leisure, but Moonbrita simply stated, "The more the merrier," and pressed down upon his shoulder until he was settled. Whereupon a warm cup was thrust into his hands. To Moonbrita's delight, it was not long before her straight-laced companion was drawn into vigorous discussion of prophecy with their mentor. As the afternoon wore on, the levier's impromptu picnic continued to grow. Archon Rambrose arrived to captivate Urianger and Louisois with his insight into the culture of ancient Alec, while Dickon of the Last Stand answered Emilien's summon with fresh batch of confection to prove his hotly debated theory on baking the perfect sweetmeat. Conversation flowed as freely as the tea they had shared. Every back and forth, every peal of laughter, warm and comforting, until azure skies blushed crimson and the pale sun faded, making way for the shadow moon. Emiliens gingerly closed the journal, then shut her eyes to recall the journey home that fateful evening. In that fading twilight, Louisois, Porcino, and Alfino had each made a solemn vow. The flames of hope yet burned bright, and I shall not see them smothered. Louisois knew only too well that his effort to forestall the seventh umbral calamity would place him in mortal danger. Yet on that day, surrounded by family and friends, he had been the picture of contentment, and our hope burns bright still for your legacy. Mine is a difficult path, but I shall walk it gladly for our children and their children. Porcino's meaning was clearer in retrospect. With knowledge of the Exodus, though he had not seen eye to eye with his father on matter of politics, Louisois had never pressed. He simply listened and nodded, aware perhaps of the secret his son had sworn to keep. But you need to keep them no longer, my darling. Our children live, and these burdens are not yours to bear alone. I shall learn and grow that I might become a man worthy to follow in my father and grandfather's footsteps. Young Alfino's aspiration had been pure and selfless, meanwhile, a child's promise, but not an empty one. He and Alice had done so much for so many. They had defied their father, in so doing rekindled his hope, and together with countless allies they had met on the journey, they had spread peace far and wide. Against all odds, you each remain true to your words, and will each remain forever in my heart.